Over the next 2 months, I'm going to be releasing my top 80 quarterbacks for the 2021 college football season. Making this list was pretty tough as I had to take into account players coming off of injuries, players who transferred, potential quarterback battles, and a whole lot more. Each week, I'm going to be releasing 10 quarterbacks from my list. Last week, we took a look at the quarterbacks I had ranked 61 through 70, which means that this week, we're going to be taking a look at the quarterbacks ranked from 51 through 60. Before we get to today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to the channel. If you love college football content like this, then this is definitely the place for you. Kicking off our video today at number 60 is Eastern Michigan quarterback Preston Hutchinson. He started all 6 games last season for the Eagles. In his first year as the starting quarterback, he completed 64% of his passes for over 1,600 yards with 12 passing touchdowns. He also added 8 rushing touchdowns, giving him a 12-game pace of 40 total touchdowns. In his 6 games, he threw for at least 240 yards in all of them, including 2 games with over 315 yards. He had a passing touchdown in all but 1 game and had at least 2 touchdowns in 4 games. He also had a rushing touchdown in 5 games, had 3 in one, and had 2 in another. I get a 6-game sample size is small, but the fact that he was on a full season pace for 40 total touchdowns makes him a pretty exciting name to keep an eye on in the MAC next season, especially with another full year of experience under his belt. Coming in at number 59 is Charlie Brewer, who is now a quarterback at Utah. After a very successful career at Baylor, he opted to transfer to the Utes. They're going to have a pretty crowded quarterback room there in Utah, but I expect Charlie Brewer will be named the starting quarterback. In his 4 seasons at Baylor, he appeared in 44 games. He threw for 9,700 yards and had 65 passing touchdowns. He also had over 1,000 rushing yards with 22 rushing touchdowns. He's second all-time in program history in passing yards and in passing touchdowns, and would have surpassed Robert Griffin III had he stayed for another season. Brewer had many great moments with the Bears, but unfortunately, injuries and just some questionable play ultimately led to him leaving the program. It'll be interesting to see Brewer in a brand new conference, but as we've seen over the years, he has a number of games where he plays like a fantastic quarterback. It's going to be exciting to see how he does for the Utes in his final season in college. We're going to stay in the Pac-12 and go to Chase Garber's quarterback for Cal at number 58. This is already going to be Garber's 4th season with the Golden Bears. He's appeared in 24 games over the last 3 seasons. In his 3 years, he's thrown for over 4,000 yards with 34 passing touchdowns and 700 rushing yards with 7 rushing touchdowns. Due to the Pac-12's small sample size last season, we didn't really see much of him. In 4 games, he threw for 800 yards with 6 touchdowns to go along with 2 rushing touchdowns. In 2019, when he appeared in 9 games, Garber's threw for 1,800 yards with 14 touchdowns and only 3 interceptions to go along with over 200 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. Garber's actually leads all current Pac-12 starting quarterbacks in wins and is tied for first in starts. The Pac-12 will have a solid amount of really good quarterbacks next season, and there's a chance that Garber's can be one of the best. Coming in at number 57 is Mississippi State quarterback Will Rogers. Nobody expected him to see as much playing time as he did, but once KJ Costello went down, Rogers took over. In 9 games for the Bulldogs, he completed 69% of his passes and threw for 2,000 yards. He also added 11 passing touchdowns. He had a really good 5-game stretch in which he threw for more than 1,500 yards and had 9 passing touchdowns. Against Ole Miss, he completed 45 of 61 passes for 440 yards with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. Against Georgia, he completed 41 of 52 passes for 340 yards with a touchdown and no interceptions. He showed flashes of being a really good quarterback, especially under the Mike Leach system. With a year under his belt, gaining knowledge and experience, Rogers can be a quarterback that absolutely lights up the stat sheet in 2021. Coming up next at number 56 is Wake Forest quarterback Sam Hartman. In his 3rd season as the Wake Forest quarterback, he threw for 2,200 yards with 13 touchdowns in 9 games last season. In 22 games over his last 3 years, he's thrown for over 5,000 yards with 33 passing touchdowns. In his career, he has 8 games with at least 250 passing yards and has 12 games in which he's thrown for at least 2 touchdowns. His best game of the 2020 season came on the road at North Carolina when he threw for 430 yards with 4 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. In their bowl game against Wisconsin, he threw for over 300 yards with 3 passing touchdowns. Up next at number 55, we have Western Michigan quarterback Caleb Ellaby. Last season for the Broncos, he had one of the best touchdown to interception rates in the entire country. In 6 games, he had 18 passing touchdowns with only 2 interceptions. He also completed 65% of his passes for 1,700 yards while averaging 283 passing yards per game. He also added 4 rushing touchdowns as well. His best game of the season came against Central Michigan when he threw for 380 yards with 5 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown. He also had a game in which he threw for 290 yards with 4 passing touchdowns and another game with 280 yards and 3 passing touchdowns. Well, I talked about a 12-game pace earlier in this video, but Ealy was on a full season pace for 3,400 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, and 8 rushing touchdowns. Yeah, that's pretty damn good. I'm telling you, the MAC is going to have so many solid quarterbacks this season, and they're going to be a really fun conference to watch. Coming in at number 54, we have Western Kentucky quarterback Bailey Zappy. He comes from Houston Baptist, where he spent the last 3 seasons. In only 4 games last year, he threw for 1,800 yards with 15 touchdowns and 1 interception. At 458 yards per game, his average led all of college football and ranked 100 yards above the leading FBS passer. With 10,000 passing yards, he led all active FCS quarterbacks and ranked only behind 4 FBS quarterbacks for most career passing yards. In his career at Houston Baptist, he completed 61% of his passes for 10,000 yards and 78 passing touchdowns. In 2019, he completed 357 passes for 3,800 yards and 35 touchdowns. His 35 touchdowns led all of the FCS. His 317 passing yards per game led his conference and had him ranked 2nd nationally. His 30 completions per game were also the most among all FCS quarterbacks. Zappy was one of the best FCS quarterbacks we've seen over the last decade, so it's going to be exciting to see what he can do while playing for an FBS program. Up next at number 53 is another quarterback who hasn't really lived up to expectations, and that's Nebraska quarterback Adrian Martinez. After a solid freshman campaign, he's just taken a step back every season since then. In 7 games last season, he threw for 1,000 yards with 4 touchdown passes and 3 interceptions. He did, however, add over 500 yards on the ground with 7 rushing touchdowns. Luke McCaffrey saw a solid amount of work as he ate into the snaps, but he was just awful out there. During Martinez's 3 seasons with the Cornhuskers, he's thrown for 5,600 yards with 31 passing touchdowns and 20 interceptions. He's also added 1,800 yards on the ground with 22 rushing touchdowns. During his time as the starting quarterback, he's had 15 games with at least 200 passing yards and 10 games with at least 2 passing touchdowns. He also has 17 games with at least 50 rushing yards and 16 games with a rushing touchdown. The talent is definitely there for Adrian Martinez, no question about it. The only question is, can he put it together for a full 12-game season? I sure hope so, because when he's going, he's one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the country. Coming in at 52, we have Hawaii quarterback Cordero. He had a pretty impressive year last season as the full-time starter for the Rainbow Warriors. In 9 games, the sophomore threw for over 2,000 yards with 14 passing touchdowns. He also added just under 500 yards on the ground with 7 rushing touchdowns. His best game of the season last year came in a win against New Mexico, in which he threw for 400 yards with 4 passing touchdowns. He also added 40 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in that game. He threw for at least 200 yards in 7 and 9 games and had multiple touchdown passes in 4 of them. He also had a rushing touchdown in 5 games. We've seen some really good quarterbacks at Hawaii over the years, and there's a strong chance that Cordero can be the next great one. Ending today's video at number 51 is Ball State quarterback Drew Plitt. This will be his 5th season with the team. Over his last 4 years, he's appeared in 32 games for Ball State and has thrown for more than 6,500 yards with 50 passing touchdowns. He also has a total of 12 rushing touchdowns as well. Over the last 2 seasons especially, he has really developed into one of the more underrated quarterbacks among Group of 5 schools. In 2019, he threw for just under 3,000 yards with 24 touchdown passes. Then, in 2020, he had 2,200 yards in only 8 games and 17 passing touchdowns. He threw for at least 200 yards in every game last season and had a passing touchdown in every game as well. There were 5 games in which he had 2 touchdown passes and 3 games in which he had at least 3. Entering the season, he's 4th in program history in passing yards and 3rd in program history in passing touchdowns. Well, that wraps up this portion of my rankings for this video. Was one of the quarterbacks I mentioned today ranked too high or ranked too low in your opinion? Drop a comment down below and share with me your thoughts. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm going to be ranking the top 80 quarterbacks for the upcoming season, so stay tuned to see where your favorite quarterback falls on this list. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications so you're notified when I post my next list. If you love college football content like this, then this is definitely the place for you. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.